The characterization for the Admirals continues to gain more depth, the narrative thread involving ZP0 and J. Garcia Saturn and Egghead remains to be resolved, and yet when it comes to the Straw Hats, there's a poetic element to the reality that the only Vegapunk they were able to sail off with in the end was also the one that was first introduced. I still think Edison is secretly alive though. I think he's the one who updated Lilith on the things that she missed out on while she was KO'd. There's a new arc on the horizon and with it a brand new silhouette to match. Thankfully though, when it comes to the real world, we no longer have to guess who the actors that will be playing the characters of Dr. Kureha, Dr. Hero Look, King Cobra, and Vivi will be. Now I'm sure I'm not the only one that was surprised by Jamie Lee Curtis being absent from the lineup, but maybe it could have something to do with her recently just finishing up filming Freaky Friday 2 with Lindsay Lohan. Regardless though, I personally remember Katie Sagal from the Disney Channel original movie called Smart House, where she plays an AI character that holds a family hostage against their will in their own home. I also recognized King Cobra's actor because he used to play a guy named Mohinder in Heroes. And then I know that people are saying that Vivi's actress shows up in a show called Bridgerton, but something that I recently found out is that she will also be playing the lead in a show called, get this, Song of the Sun God. Apparently the show will be based off of a novel, and I haven't read it, so I'm just going to give you like a brief summary of what I found online. So Vivi's actress will be playing the lead who's in an arranged marriage, and it says here that the couple will learn to love each other and protect their growing family against the backdrop of increasing ethnic tension as the country descends into a bloody civil war. The Song of the Sun God spans 3 continents and 3 generations of a family that remains dedicated to its homeland. This deeply moving saga is about the wisdom, mistakes, and sacrifices of our past that enable us to live more freely in the future. You have got to be freaking kidding me with this. Is there a character named Emu in the book that's infatuated with her as well? On that Alabastian related note, it turns out that season 2 of the Netflix live-action show will only reach up to Drum Island. So Chopper joining the crew and crying over pink powder cherry blossom clouds is where it'll end, which is fine with me because not only do I think that Drum Island is an underrated arc, I think it deserves a lot more love and appreciation, but I'm also glad because this means that they're going to be taking their time with Alabasta by possibly giving it a full season. Season 2 ending on Drum Island could also help the allocation of the budget a lot. I'm sure Laboon is going to be expensive. There's a lot of special effects that I think need to take place in Little Garden, and there's really no way of them getting Chopper right unless he's some kind of practical / CGI special effect. But regardless, he has to be a special effect. So budget-wise, I think it's a much better decision for them to take their time with this part of the story instead of tagging on Alabasta at the end and just rushing it. That stated, apparently the actor who will be playing Bartolomeo has also been announced. And if you're wondering why he's being announced this early in the game, it's because Oda sort of retconned his character, and we find out in Dressrosa that he was actually in Logtown when Luffy was saved by lightning. Bartolomeo viewed Luffy being saved by lightning as this heavenly divine sign of sorts, because according to King Cobra, only the gods control the weather. But more on that later. Taking it back to the live action, there's some pretty heavy speculation already in terms of who will play the characters of Ace and Crocodile. The 2 main contenders seem to be these 2 actors right here. Joe Manganiello I remember because he played Deathstroke in the post-credit scene of the Justice League movie. Not the Snyder Cut Justice League, but the first Justice League movie. He was in the post-credit scene and he was playing Deathstroke, also known as Slade. And then when it comes to the speculation of who will end up playing Robin in the live-action show, rumors seem to surround a Russian model / actress known as Lyra Abova. I definitely think she fits the part. Here's another picture of her right here. I remember reading once that Oda based pre-time Skip Sanji's design and look on Steve Buscemi in Reservoir Dogs, which was directed by Quentin Tarantino. But then I also remember reading that Robin's pre-time skip design was inspired by Uma Thurman's character in yet another Quentin Tarantino film, which is Pulp Fiction. So I definitely get some of the same vibes from Lyra as well. But again, as of right now, this is all speculation. So we recently learned that Shaka found out that York had stolen the Mother Flame because the amount of energy expenditure used on the Seraphim had been increasing. And this goes along well with the idea that I've had for a while now that it was Sun God Nika who created the Lunarian race in the first place by bestowing upon a winged race a flame and fire powers. It's kind of like Oda's take on the story of the Greek titan / god Prometheus. Now, in addition to Oda almost taking an entire chapter to retroactively make Vegapunk seem more intelligent than what he appeared to be in the story when it actually mattered, Chapter 1123 also contains some clues that furthers a lot of my suspicions regarding future reveals concerning Haki, as well as awakened Logia powers. So let's start with Haki first. Obviously, we know there's 3 types: Conquerors, Armament, and Observation, but also Oda actually introduced a pattern in regards to the advanced forms of it, which is that if we go back to Whole Cake Island, Island, we learned that the requirement to be able to use Advanced Observation Haki / Future Sight is for the user to be able to remain calm and at peace. We see this also in Film Red, where Yasopp is having trouble connecting with Usopp because he's too anxious, and it's not until he calms down that the connection can be established. Furthermore, during Luffy's training in Udon, Hyogoro is teaching him how to master an advanced form of armament, and Hyogoro tells him, you gotta relax, just let the Haki flow to your fists. Don't stress, take it easy. He also tells Luffy that the meaning of Rio is flowing cherry blossom, which goes back to my proposal that the cherry blossom trees that Hero Look found were full of Haki, and that it was that very special type and powerful Haki that had been left behind in those trees that ultimately cured his disease. So I'm sure Chopper will be able to unlock Haki because his dream is going to be tied to it. Also, it doesn't hurt that in Japanese, a lot of the names of Chopper's attacks already have the term for cherry blossom within them. And so now, thanks to Dory's comment after sensing the burst of Joy Boy's King's Haki unleashed by Emmett, we now have confirmation that Oda is in fact showing us a pattern when it comes to the most powerful types of Haki, which is that there is a serene quality that goes into advanced armament, advanced observation, as well as the most powerful kind of Conqueror's Haki. Because Dory says that he couldn't sense any hostility in the blast of Joy Boy's Haki. And so now that we know that it's totally possible to embed really powerful King's Haki into items, I think it'd be neat to see Luffy replenish Usopp's and Nami's arsenals by supplying them with items that unleash a blast of Conqueror's Haki once they hit their enemies. Then again, it would also be cool for Usopp to prove himself in Elbaf to be worthy of Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer, and then it turns out that Mjolnir has also been embedded with Supreme King's Haki. One could even say that Usopp getting Thor's hammer was somewhat foreshadowed in Wano when he tells Nami that he is in need of a close-range weapon. Additionally, something that stood out to me like a sore thumb earlier is when Vegapunk says that he has not been able to replicate Logia Devil Fruit powers. And in the incredibly convoluted flashback where we find out that Vegapunk already knew that York was the traitor, there's a moment where York says, I hope you can finish perfecting the Mother Flame, Vegapunk, and then we get a panel of Vegapunk secretly thinking to himself that he hopes that it stays incomplete. And so this goes back to what Lilith reveals to us at the start of the arc, which is that the Mother Flame will be perfected once it becomes a flame that never dies. And so something that I've been proposing for well over a year now is that the idea of an infinite element is essentially the nature of a Logia awakening. A Logia awakening is a self-sustaining natural element that never dies. Obviously, the aftermath climate in Punk Hazard seems to hint at this. The light in Nevernight Island, also known as Enies Lobby, can also turn out to be explained by the awakening of the Pika Pika no Mi. And Raijing Island, which was visited by Rouge, could also end up falling into the same category. And now that I think about it, I wonder if Rouge visiting that island specifically is going to pay off by him being the one to explain Logia awakenings to the Straw Hats and to the reader. He also belongs to the Sky Race, which is only going to turn out to be more important from here on out, because they're essentially guaranteed to survive the upcoming flood, given that they live and have access to Sky Islands. Now with that in mind, something that is very interesting about the Skypiea arc is that there aren't a whole lot of Devil Fruit users that we meet there. Counting Enel and Pierre, that only makes 2. And Enel's not originally from that island. And yet despite the lack of Devil Fruit users up in Skypiea, Sky people seem to know a lot about Devil Fruits. Wiper is actually the first person in the story to categorize Luffy's power as part of the Paramecia classification, and then a couple of chapters later, Locky reveals that Logias are the strongest types of Devil Fruits in existence. And that is a point that Oda has repeatedly warned us about over and over again. In an SBS section for volume 30, a fan went on to ask, Oda-sensei, I have a question about Logia-type Devil Fruits. In chapter 280, NL says that Paramecias have to retain their original form. Does that mean that people like Crocodile Ace or Smoker, who can freely morph their physical bodies, have Logia-type Devil Fruits? Now, to answer the question, Oda could have just said yes and left it at that, but he actually went one step further and added a chart of the 3 kinds of Devil Fruit classifications, and he also ended up saying that it's the Logia type that seems to rank higher than the other types. Additionally, Logia types being the most powerful is a statement that gets repeated twice in different chapters of the Dressrosa arc by Guts, the Colosseum announcer, as well as by Akainu in the anime before he kills Ace. And I've already discussed in a previous video about how back when One Piece was only supposed to last 5 years, Crocodile was more than likely supposed to be the strongest Logia in the series, but then as the series expanded and got longer and longer, Oda changed his mind, and that title was transferred over to Akainu. And so what we're left with is Luffy having to deal with a character by the end who not only will have the strongest Logia awakening in the story, but also someone who has advanced Conqueror's Haki as well. Now, if you want to hear my reasoning for why Akainu definitely has to have Conqueror's Haki, you can check out this video that I made a while back. But assuming both him and Kuzan are awakened, I think what ended up giving Sakazuki the edge was him already having basic King's Haki at the start of their fight. And then during those 10 days that they were fighting, he learned how to use advanced Conqueror's Haki to code his attacks. Which brings me to something else that I'm fairly convinced about, which is that a Prime Fleet Admiral Admiral, which is what Akainu is now, should be around the same level as any unnerfed member of the original 4 emperors. Not only does this claim work for the story in terms of increasing tension, but it's also supported by the bounties established by Cross Guild. And yes, I know that bounties are not an accurate power measuring tool, but I definitely trust a bounty that's been established by the combined intellectual efforts of Crocodile, Buggy, and Mihawk a lot more than any set amount that comes from the world government, especially since we know that Mihawk used to specialize in hunting Marines in the past, so he would know what a Marine is worth with a lot more accuracy. And so with that in mind, given that according to Cross Guild, an admiral is worth 3 billion berries each, just like Garp, it would make no sense to have an admiral be worth 3 crowns and then have their leader, the fleet admiral, be worth less or the exact same amount. So at the very least, the fleet admiral would be worth 4 crowns, which would make him worth 4 billion. And that would approximately put him in the same bounty range as one of the original 4 emperors. In other words, Akainu with a Logia awakening, the most powerful type of awakening there is, with Advanced Conqueror's Haki, should be around the same level as Whitebeard before he got sick. He should also be around the same level as Big Mom without her stupidity, and he should also be around the same level as Kaido, but without him having a battle fetish that causes him to intentionally lower his guard to get hit over and over again because he enjoys getting a feel for how strong people are. Furthermore, I think Oda's pattern of not showing the admirals going all out yet comes from a sense of national pride and gratitude, which is why he selectively decided to base them off famous Japanese film actors, kind of like how him and his editors were hyping up Japan-based Wano for the longest time. So what we got with Borsalino and Sakazuki's conversation on the phone was a clear picture of Oda's intent to continue to flesh out these characters and make them more three-dimensional, which is fantastic. Because even from an ability standpoint, regardless of whether they'll be revealed to be awakened users or not, Borsalino and Aramaki are the 2 admirals that are yet to showcase a double fruit attack with a name that is based off of their animal alias. So there's got to be a monkey and a bull combat move in the fights up ahead. And on that same Logia related note, I find it interesting how, like, if you think about the Skypiea gods or the gods that are mentioned during the Nolan flashback, each of them has a connection to nature, which is literally what a Logia is. And then again, we have that statement from Cobra where he says that not even a king can control the weather, that power is reserved exclusively for the gods. So it's pretty clear to me that Oda keeps hinting and warning us that a Logia awakening is just gonna be this busted, godly type of power. I'm sure you guys remember that before Ace dies, there's this whole emphasis about how the Magu Magu no Mi or Akainu's powers are superior to the powers of the Mera Mera no Mi / the Flare Flare fruit, because magma is so hot that it can even burn fire. And I think that's actually something that's going to get brought up again in the story when Luffy fights Akainu. Because if magma is hotter than fire, magma can burn fire, right? What's hotter than magma? The sun. The temperature of the sun is hotter than magma. So to me, it's very likely that with Luffy being the sun god, or having eaten the sun god fruit, there's going to be a moment where Luffy uses his sun powers and burns Akainu. Speaking of the Magu Magu no Mi, we know from Pagaya that pyrobloin is a fundamental ingredient that goes into the formation of sky islands, and he also states that pyrobloin reaches the sky via volcanic eruptions. So I wonder if Akainu is going to have a change of heart by the end and then uses Logia powers to create sky islands for more people and civilians to survive Imu's flood. Additionally, it's worth mentioning that in the panel where we see the Kazuki clan creating the poneglyphs, we see a volcanic eruption in the background, which I'm pretty sure came from the Mount Fuji that's in Wano, which makes me believe that pyrobloin was also an ingredient that was used in the creation of the poneglyphs. And since we know that poneglyphs and the red line are also said to be indestructible, I think the red line was also created using pyrobloin to some extent. And when it comes to the mysterious silhouette awaiting at the shores of Elbaf, the usual suspects include Scopper Gabbin as well as Shiki. Now the idea of it being Shiki comes from the silhouette looking like the figure that we saw drinking with Crocus in a cover page, and Shiki matching his color scheme perfectly. Now something you could ask is that if the man in the cover page is actually Shiki, then where is the steering wheel on his head? And to that I would say that we know that Crocus is a top tier doctor, so maybe he removed the steering wheel from Shiki's head. Funnily enough, Oda recently brought up Shiki in the most recent SBS. He was talking about how he has a rule about not giving characters the ability to fly without any kind of restrictions or limitations, but Shiki ended up being kind of like an exception to that rule. And now that I think about it, maybe it's because that would allow them to escape Imu's flood very easily by the end of the story. And this concept goes into what Morgans was saying in this chapter about how perhaps it'll be his era soon, because the sky is his home.
And on that note, the way that Morgans opens up the chapter really reminds me of another character that we haven't seen in a while, which is Scratchman Apu. Because look at what Morgan says. He says, "It's time to get the dance floors of the world bouncing, folks. We got a fresh set list of tracks packed full of news. Plus, we also know that Apu was literally leaking info to Morgans and Wano. But another reason for why I'm bringing him up here is because personally, when it comes to the silhouette awaiting in Elbaf, if it's not Scopper, then I really do hope that it ends up being one of the members of the Rock's pirates that we know the least about. Primarily either Silver Axe or Ochoku/Wan Zi. Now the thing about him turning out to be Wan Zi is that Wan Zi was a very famous Chinese pirate in real-world history. And when it came to the reveal of the nationalities of each of the supernova, Oda said that if Apu were to live in the real world, he would be from China. Not only that, but Apu's name is actually a reference to another Chinese pirate by the name of Choi Apu. So it'd be cool if it turned out that Apu had some degree of connection with Wan Zi, who was a former member of the Rock's Pirates. Finally, in Wano, we also saw that Apu had some degree of control over the numbers, which are ancient giants, right? They're Oni. And so the last time we saw Apu, he was also with one of the numbers. So I wonder if that could connect Apu to Elbaf to some extent. Because Dory and Broggy, who are also known as the Blue and Red Ogres, in Japanese, they both have the word Oni in their aliases, because Oni means ogre. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. But before I go, I just want to say that I really appreciate this celebratory panel with the Straw Hats. And I particularly like it because it has Robin and Jinbei on the foreground. And so if you remember in an SBS, Oda said that if the Straw Hats were a family, Robin would be the mom and Jinbei would be the dad. So it just looks like Mama and Papa are there sort of celebrating, looking over their children. Thank you guys again for watching. Have a great week. Take care. Catch you guys later. Bye.